Hey, welcome to the Drep and Stone podcast, a podcast where two friends raise a glass and have a conversation. I'm Nick.
I'm Kyle.
Kyle, before we get started this week, I suggest that everyone grab something delicious to drink.
Okay. Everyone grab something delicious and refreshing to drink.
Man, you have such good ideas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was your suggestion.
Just messing with you.
Kind of follow the logic.
No,
the train of thought that got me there.
No, we were both we both jumped on board that train and we were heading in the same direction.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. We got something in the mail.
We did.
And we probably already posted this on social media. Who knows how any of that actually works.
Yep.
But we got a package from our friends at RationAle.
The delicious NA beer that we absolutely fell in love with.
Oh, yeah.
They sent us a little care package.
Yeah. We saw that they were releasing their Kolsch. And as soon as we saw that, I was like, oh, we got to email Jamie.
Yep.
Like, Jamie, come on, man. Like, hook us up. Please. And guess what Jamie did?
He sent us an amazing, like, beautifully, like, curated little care package.
Yeah.
With, like, the whole setup.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It had 4 cans of the Kolsch,
Yep.
which is unfortunately not enough.
Yeah, for sure.
And it had like 2 of these really cool little glasses, like taster glasses.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, such a great presentation, like, high quality stuff.
Oh, yeah. I highly recommend, like, we cracked that open. We actually, like I said, we did it for a social media thing. But I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
I have a little bit in my glass. I'm going to take one more sip. Ready?
Yep.
That just sounded like a good sip.
Yeah.
You know what?
Probably the best.
It tasted
sip.
like a good sip too.
Yep.
Yeah. That is fantastic. It's super light and refreshing.
Yep.
And it doesn't have all of the weight of the alcohol.
Yeah. And just incredibly flavorful. Everything you want out of a Kolsch, they found a way to do it.
Yeah, without, again, the alcohol, which is just fantastic.
Yeah, all the flavor and none of the hangover.
And if you want to hear more from RationAle, go back to our episode that released on April 10th of 2024. It's actually episode 237. We hung out with Jamie, one of the founders of RationAle, and we talked all things NA beer.
Great conversation. So much cool information. Go back and give it a listen.
Yeah, and more importantly, go grab yourself some RationAle.
Yeah, figure out a way to get some of that. You're gonna love it. All right, but for the episode,
yeah.
I've got us a drink here that hopefully will lend itself well to probably a deep conversation. A weighty one, at least.
I like the words that you're saying. What do you got?
I've pulled out the Weller 12.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you win the lottery or something?
How did I get this?
I think through the program.
Oh yeah, got this out of a vault, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, a little program thing. It was a Weller that I had never had. It's one that's highly sought after.
Yeah.
And said, hey, might as well. It was the best thing available to me at the time. So I pulled the trigger on it, and we have it here in front of us now.
I'm happy that we do.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is our 4th Weller.
Is it really?
Yeah. So we've had Special Reserve, the green label.
Okay, the regular Weller.
We had the Antique 107.
Okay, that's right.
Red label. We've had Foolproof.
Ah, the blue label.
The blue label.
Yeah.
So now this is the Weller 12 black label.
Wow.
Yeah, moving our way through the Weller Reserve.
It's only taken us, what, 5
years?
Well, 5 years of the pod and like 7 years total.
Yeah, for
wow,
sure.
Okay.
It's just another one of those bottles. I've never seen it to buy. I've never seen it to purchase. I've never seen it anywhere where I could acquire it. So it was just kind of one of those things of like, I kind of have to pull the trigger.
Yeah, I mean, and when we say that, like, we've seen it, but we've not seen it at a price that we're willing to pay.
Right.
Yeah, because I've definitely seen this bottle, and it's always at that top shelf, and it's like, that's a lot of zeros.
I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know that I've ever seen it in a store to purchase.
Really?
I've probably seen it in a, fancy establishment. But yeah, so I mean, I've probably seen it maybe at a restaurant or at a bar, but like I don't think I've ever seen it in a store.
Oh, okay.
To purchase.
I've seen it, but I've very readily passed it up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, for sure.
Okay. Well, can we open it?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, let's do it. Hey, Kyle, pop that cork.
No, sir. This is a Weller.
It's beautiful.
They don't cork these.
Thank you, sir. Beautiful.
And there we are. The Weller 12 year. The original wheated bourbon.
So this is regular Special Reserve,
right?
Just at 12 years.
I would assume so.
So the ABV is 80?
90.
Oh, okay, 90. That's right. Yeah. Okay. All right. I mean, color-wise, This thing is pretty dark.
Yeah, I mean, for a 90 proof,
right,
at 12 years, yeah, it's got some color on it.
Well, and I think the black labeling is a bit of a trick of the eye too. Like it makes it look a little darker in the bottle.
Definitely in the bottle.
Yeah, in the glass, like, I mean, we don't have a bottle of regular Weller, but like I'm just looking at some stuff that would be similar, and it's a shade hair darker.
Yeah, it just looks like brown liquor.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we roll it?
Yeah, I did.
I like to talk about the things that I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like I need to announce it so that people know that I'm doing it.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I'll tell you why. I don't want to be that
because there's a microphone.
Well, absolutely, there's that, and also like I don't want to be that bourbon podcast guy that like doesn't roll his whiskey.
Oh,
and so like somebody be like, yeah, Nick doesn't roll his whiskey.
Any Dreppin' Stoner would know. We've already covered that.
Multiple times over. Like, dude, this is episode 281.
Yeah.
We've been doing this a minute.
Always roll and swirl.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
We're coating that glass.
On the nose.
I get a lot of cherry.
Real cherry. And like cherry cordial.
Yeah. Cherry and syrup.
Syrupy cherry. Like you're going to take some of that and like sprinkle it on some ice cream. You dump it on some ice cream.
Maybe some dark chocolate shavings.
I get library. Like
yeah.
like Art Deco library. Like that library's been around, a minute. Oh, it's college library. There's a little bit of dank in there too.
New York Public Library.
What is that urine smell? No, I mean like old books, like a used bookshop, like just old, but like not just old books, but like the smell of a book that's been like used a lot.
Ooh. A lot of dog earring.
Yeah, a lot of highlighter.
Not dog earrings.
Right.
Dog earring.
Is that unethical? Can you put an earring on a dog?
Sure you can.
I mean, I don't think I would.
Maybe like a
clip on
Doberman.
Oh,
they got the upright ears.
Yeah.
So they won't flop over.
They don't come like that. Like that's not stock.
Put rods in there. It's a pretty nose.
It is a pretty nose, but there's a bit of a fake's not right, but like
aspartame.
Yeah, like slight artificial.
Yeah.
Like it's a bit enhanced. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do get some sort of like a sugar substitute.
I'm surprised at 12 years old I'm not getting more leather and I'm not getting more dusty wheat field, because that's something that's so prominent about a wheated bourbon. I'm not getting any like Cheerio notes. I'm not getting dusty bookshop. I'm not getting like wheat field. I'm not getting any of that.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the extra age just starts to like whittle away at
like
that.
Quiet it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I think maybe just the grain just becomes more subdued.
Sure.
With that much time in the barrel.
That's a good point.
Maybe.
Yeah. Like maybe you got several seasons of moving liquid in and out of the barrel, so maybe that's quieting it down.
Like it starts to nudge up against those notes that you get from like an old bourbon, but I feel like they're just starting to kind of become present.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just another example of like I'd be really interested. Like, what does this nose at 100?
Right. Sure.
Or at 110.
110. Yeah. I can tell you, I expected more oak and I expected more leather, and I'm interested that I'm not getting it.
Yep.
Maybe that's just on the nose. So, does that mean we should go to the palate?
To the palate.
Oh, that is very cherry.
Yeah,
like
I get
Queen Anne cherry.
I get cherry and caramel.
Yeah. Like punchy. But there's where the oak is a little more prominent. It's on the back end and like the back. Ooh, it got a little bit of hug going on. Ooh.
It's not prominent. It puts its hand on the small of your back and it like kind of guides you.
Sure.
It's not like a heavy-handed bitter.
Right.
To me, this is kind of like this is kind of why Weller is so popular, and I think so many people like Weller.
Yeah.
Is that it's really friendly.
Super friendly.
It's not bitey. It's not complex, and it's not harsh. It's just easygoing.
You just described regular Weller.
Yeah.
And you described this, and I think that's a bit of my problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is essentially the same thing. Just it's got a little bit of extra age on it, and it's got a little bit extra proof on it. But other than that, it's
and a lot of extra cash on it.
If you're gonna pay for it, for sure.
I mean, it's been a minute since I've had regular Weller, but I don't know if I would get the age on it. Like I think there's definite differences because like that I don't remember that cherry note at all on regular Weller.
Right.
But would you get? Wow, that's an old bourbon.
I think you would definitely. I think there's way more flavor in this than there is in the green label.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there would certainly, and I think this has a fair amount of flavor to it.
Agreed.
You know, it's not a watered down weak whiskey by any means. It's smooth sailing. It is dessert.
Yeah.
I think there is more flavor in this than there is in what I remember Special Reserve having. And is that due to just the age? Perhaps, but I don't know. My recollection of Special Reserve has always just been way more watered down and just kind of lackluster.
It's the same proof. So then it has to be the age.
Yeah.
There's more flavor, but I think what I'm kind of missing is what I liked out of the other older bourbons we've had recently is the complexity, is a bit of that slight roller coaster.
Yeah.
Because like you just said, it is smooth sailing.
Yep.
Like it's just easy going. It's, it's yacht rock.
Right. Yeah. It does have like an air of like formality to it.
Ooh.
In its palate, because it doesn't have like those, it doesn't have anything funky. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have anything harsh and challenging. It is just kind of very like a formal bourbon.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like that also, I think, can also be described as a tad safe and potentially boring.
All of those things withstanding, I really like it.
Yeah, me too.
Like, I mean, it is solid. Not only solid for what I know you paid for it, but solid overall. Like just all across the board. It's a great bourbon.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things that I think a couple of years ago, not that it needed a boost in popularity, but because it showed up on a cowboy TV show.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was on Yellowstone.
Yeah.
That it, again, just went through the roof of, like, you can't find it.
Right.
So it's just another one of those things that, some of these brands get to that level. What I say, is it absolutely worth all the hype? No.
Agreed.
But is it absolutely, like, worth condemning to, the bottom shelf?
No.
Certainly not.
No.
Like, it's delightful.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And that's, in some ways, I'm shifting some of my bourbon perspective in terms of, like, is it worth the hype? No, it is not. I can be critical of the thing, and yet I can still like it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you can be critical of, like, the hype and the secondary pricing and all of that nonsense, but at the same time, like, it has earned that in a weird way. Granted, mostly it's been created.
Sure.
But it's still there for a reason, kind of.
But I think where you talk about, like, it earns it, it does earn it in so much as it's still a solid product.
Yeah, it's quality.
Exactly. It's not like, oh, this thing has all of this hype and you get it and you're like, wow, that's a dumpster fire.
You're right.
It's not that at all. You get it and you're like, wow,
solid.
Is it worth secondary? No.
Oh, heck no. Yeah, not even close.
But how many things are, in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah.
But I think,
many.
Right. But I think that's the
once you've had it.
Correct. Yeah. But I think that's the cool thing here is like, oh no, that's still solid.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I would say that pretty much for everything Weller that we've had. It's all good. It's all really, really good.
Yeah.
It's just not 3 times as good as anything else.
It's not worth ballpark. 3 times the price of anything else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
If I could have that on my shelf on the regular,
oh yeah,
that's delightful.
Yeah.
Would not be disappointed at all.
Not at all. Now that we got a great pour, Kyle, what do you want to talk about this week?
I just read a book. I thought I might pick your brain on it, see if you've ever heard of it or read it or got any thoughts on it.
Okay. I've read a couple books in my time.
For sure.
Yeah.
I just read The Great Gatsby.
You say that again?
I just finished reading The Great Gatsby
for like the 10th time.
No, actually, it was my first time actually reading it.
This is the first time you've read The Great Gatsby?
Yep, cover to cover.
Wow.
Yeah. You've read it?
Yeah. Yeah.
How many? All right, we're playing.
Okay.
How many times would you just ballpark it that you've read the book?
Legitimately read the book?
Yeah.
I'm kind of embarrassed to say. Cover to cover, read the book north of 75 times.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I usually, like, when people ask that, because, like, this is something that I generally...
So at some point in time,
I've read it several times a year.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to say. Yeah. And so, like, okay.
At some point in time, meaning every time. You've read that.
Yeah.
And you only started reading
a couple years ago. No joke. I've read this book. That's a bit hyperbolic. And when anybody asks me how many times have you read this, I usually give like north of 100. And the reason being, in my day job, I teach literature. Yep. So I usually like am reading along with, the various classes, and I constantly am going back and reviewing things and thinking about things. So like, yes, is that hyperbolic? Sure. But legitimately cover to cover, I've probably read it 20, 25 times. Legitimately.
Just on your own.
Just on my own. Yeah. Like with no engagement in anything. You're right. In anything else. But if you throw in that like teaching number, yeah, it's honestly closer to 100 or above. Right. And that's just the nature of like the thing that I do when I'm kind of going through the literature. But I can without a doubt say that this, I think the standard literature nerd answer in terms of like what's your favorite novel is like the one I just finished in some ways. But this is the one that I constantly come back to. So this is in some ways comfort food, but it's also like something challenging for me. Right. And I would say that this is my favorite novel.
Interesting.
And I love it.
Yeah. Like I'm going to fight the urge.
Sure.
To one, just use this whole episode to talk to you specifically about why. So
why?
Why?
So for me, I think it was in some ways right place, right time of reading it.
I just want to deep dive into your whole history with the book at this point in time. When's the first time you read it?
The first time I fully read it was somewhere early college. I know that I was assigned it in high school, but it wasn't something that I actually read in high school. It wasn't something that like I had. I know I was supposed to, and my 10th grade English teacher, I know that he listens to the pod, and I'm so sorry. I did not
Revelations.
I did not read this like I should have. I also did not read Wuthering Heights.
While we're on the topic,
I need to get some things off my chest. I did not read Wuthering Heights. I should have. I know that I got an A on that project. I definitely did not read that book.
Been harboring some.
Oh yeah, deep-seated guilt.
Yeah,
for sure. For years at this point. No,
I got a really good grade on a book report that I did for 101 Dalmatians 1 year. Never read that book.
Yeah.
Just winged it.
I actually BS'd a report in college too with a guy who like his PhD was in the book that I was giving a report on.
Wow.
And he called me out in class.
Oh, man.
And he was like, yeah, I think that's wrong. I was like, well, my research says it's right.
Yeah. Prove it.
And the dude.
Prove it, bro.
And the dude was like, okay, well, if your research says it's right. And then like I showed him my research. He's like, okay. I still got a fine grade. Nice. Like I passed the class, but
incredible.
Yeah, I think that guy is now like the dean of literature and arts in like some college in Connecticut. Begins with a Y. Anyway, so all of that to say, I think the first time I actually fully read it was early college.
Gotcha.
And
did it grab you immediately by the groin?
Immediately.
No kidding.
Like I can remember ripping through it the first time. Like so much so that, and rarely do I do this anymore, I put the book down, did something else, and I immediately went back to it. I read it, if not a single session, like maybe one or two, maybe 2 or 3 sessions. Like I ripped through it. Because to be fair, reading The Great Gatsby, I mean, it's most printings, it tends to be in that 160 page-ish mark. Mm-hmm. So it's not super long.
Yeah, it's not a tough read.
It is like so many of that era, books of that era, it's a deceptively tough read. So I think like I just ripped through it, man.
Sure.
And I read it legitimately cover to cover once a year and have ever since.
Any like, is there a time of year that like triggers that, or is it just you get an itch for it?
I just get an itch for it. Yeah, I get an itch for it, and I think like that to me is what makes The Great Gatsby so special. Is that it's not a seasonal book. It's not something like I almost always read A Christmas Carol every Christmas season, or listen to it or some version of that.
The Muppets,
obviously. No, I always listen to or read Dickens's version.
Yeah.
And so that's obviously is very seasonal for me. It's usually around that Christmas season. Sometimes I read it like right after Thanksgiving. Sometimes I even read it right after Christmas. But The Great Gatsby is something that kind of transcends that. Like I'll read it any time of the year. And for me, it's one of those books that, I don't know, it's just the way that it functions within my life, but I grasp something different every single time. So as I age and as I go through seasons in life, not just like, summer, fall, winter, spring seasons, but like just seasons of life in general, like there's always something that just jumps out at me every single time I read it.
That first time you read it and it grabbed you in the gooey bit.
Yeah.
Like what grabbed you? Is it the structure? Is it the way that Fitzgerald wrote the book? Is it his turn of phrase? Is it just the plot in general? Like what really got you?
So it's two things. For me, it was the beauty of the writing. Fitzgerald, especially within The Great Gatsby, is a very poetic writer. There are many, the manner in which he expresses certain things going on within the novel tends to be more poetic than it is prosaic. So like, yes, it's prose. He's writing a novel, but like descriptions are a little more highbrowed and in some ways like than they need to be. And there's this like elevation of poetic writing that I love because I love poetry too. And there's also this sense of guarded nature.
It's weird right there that you would even say that it's more highbrow than it needs to be in reference to this book.
Yeah. No, and
that's
for
like,
sure.
That's the whole point.
That's the whole point. And but it also is I really identify with Nick Carraway in so much as like the individual that he is and is expressed and written. And it kind of coincides in some ways with one of my other favorite books, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, in that like you have this first person limited narrator.
It is weird. It almost kind of jumps back and forth. There's like a point in time where it feels like Carraway is talking to somebody else.
Yeah.
Telling the story, but then other times he's also like talking directly to you.
It's the multiple perspectives and points of view within the book where it's Nick, but it's only what Nick knows. And there's a way in which I'm drawn to that. And it's also after reading it the first time and it grabbed me by the gooey bits, like you said, it was my perception of the novel and realizing the dissonance that was inherent to that in terms of like, if you've never read it or if you read it not esoterically, if you read it kind of ephemerally, like you just pick it up and read it and you're not like thinking about it necessarily. I think you could read it like a love story. I think you could read it like a buddy love story in some ways. And I think that is not what this book is. It's not what it's supposed to be. It's not what it is. It's like listening to...
Well, that's what it is on the surface.
Correct. Like if you listen to Born in the USA, like it's a banger.
Oh yeah. You think that's like... And you think it's a very patriotic...
Yeah. And it is not at all.
Yeah.
Like on the surface level, yeah, it's a patriotic, like Born in the USA.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And you listen to the lyrics and you're like, oh.
Oh.
And like so many of Springsteen's songs are like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you got this like great beat, this like upbeat song, like he's like belting it out and you're like, wait, who hit who? What's going on? Like I'm just living paycheck to pay, so it's very much that dissonance. And that just grabbed me. Like you have this thing that is venerated for being something. And then like, it is very clearly not supposed to be that.
Right.
Sorry that I'm gushing over this.
No, like that's honestly like...
Do you want to see my tattoo?
That's why...
I got to take off my pants.
What is it, green light?
No, I wouldn't do that.
What would you do? If you could get a Great Gatsby tattoo, is it an old Rolls Royce with like one wheel on the side?
Just a broken windshield? Yeah. No, honestly, it'd probably just be quotes. Like I've thought, like legitimately thought about that.
Right.
And like, it would be tough to pick like the yeah,
especially the first one.
Yeah,
just give me a whole chapter on my butt cheek.
Well, that's what I got.
Oh, called it.
Yeah,
chapter 12. Yeah, like that's part of why I wanted to read this because like we've had this conversation. Obviously, like we've talked about how like this book specifically is different for you, and it holds like a higher echelon of literature recognition for you.
Yeah.
And so like I wanted to read it just because I could never have. What I hate about it.
Well, can I ask you before you tell me that?
Well, it's not going to ruin anything.
Oh, okay.
The thing I hate is that I saw the movie first, and I hate that. I wish I could have had the experience of reading it.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
And like I love the Leonardo DiCaprio version. I think
really
do.
It is a fair, like they stay pretty.
Yeah, as like bizarre as Baz Luhrmann movies are, and as bizarre as that movie is, I really enjoy it.
Yeah. But I was like reading it through that filter, and that was frustrating.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
And yes, it absolutely shapes your perspective.
Yeah.
Because that was not my perspective. I read the book several times at that point by the time I watched the movie.
There's not many instances where I can think of where I watched a movie and then went to read the book after.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't recommend it. The whole time I'm reading it, like I could not get, I couldn't create my own setting, and my own like vocabulary.
Sure.
Because it was already provided for me. So like I couldn't get DiCaprio. And Peter Parker out of my head.
Maguire.
Like it was just overrun by them every time.
And for me, like DiCaprio, I actually think nails pretty well what I thought Gatsby would look like. The beauty of The Great Gatsby as a novel is you really don't know a whole lot about Nick. Like you don't really know what he looks like. You know a lot about Gatsby. You know a lot about everybody else. But Nick really doesn't talk about himself a whole lot.
Right.
Like there are bits and pieces, but it's a lot about other people.
Right.
So like in some ways, I almost don't care about Tobey Maguire. Like I'm fine that he's in there. I think he does a good job, but he's just like a kind of an ancillary thing in that case to me anyway.
That, and I thought like, I mean, at least the movie perspective of like that he's in like something of like an insane asylum or like something telling this story.
Sanatorium or Terium. I can't remember which, but he's supposed to be like a raging alcoholic, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Which fits.
Yeah. There's some evidence of that, like in terms of how Fitzgerald wanted to approach it, but that's not necessarily true to the book.
Right. Yeah. Well, and certainly like it's not like it's an aspect of the narrative in any way like it is like in The Sun Also Rises.
Right.
You know, it's not that kind of a thing. Like they certainly talk about like they're going to go to town. Well, be sure to go ahead and grab a bottle of whiskey for the road. You know, kind of a thing.
Several.
Yeah, like grab it, put it on a towel. Like, but it's also at the same time it's not expound upon. It's not as relevant and such a necessity and like almost like a character of the story like it is there. Here it's just more or less just kind of it's just the time. And granted, interesting that it's written in a era of prohibition and set in that state of time.
Yeah.
You know, but it was still obviously just still, you know, it's still available to those who need it.
Correct.
And can acquire it.
So I really am happy for you that you're reconnecting or just experiencing for the first time all of this classic literature. Also, as someone who's in their middle years, like reading all of these things that I don't like that. Like you should have read this. I don't like people that say that, and I don't like putting that on myself and other people. But all these things that maybe in some ways are so ubiquitous and like everybody quote unquote knows them, but like you're experiencing them now. Like I envy you that you get to experience it for the first time.
Right.
Because like I remember my reading of the first time.
Right.
So like that's so cool.
Yeah.
So I want to know, what did you think? And don't, I mean, if you absolutely hated it, like don't, you know.
Not at all. Like I told you before we had this conversation that like, and I feel like this falls into that same category of like, I've read a lot of these like quote unquote classic American literature focused pieces recently.
Yeah.
And like so far, like every single one of them, like as I'm reading it, I get through it and I'm kind of left with like, I'm surprised this is as revered as it is.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I would say that with Gatsby. And I think it's essentially just my naivete of the medium. Just not having like the full appreciation of the poetic writing versus something that is more dumbed down and not as intellectual or creative in a way. But like I don't know what necessarily I'm expecting them to be.
Right.
Just the ones that I've read recently, I'm kind of like that was a good story. But it surprises me that so many people wrapped this up and were like, yes, to the point that became like, oh man, you got to read that. You know, I think of it in terms of just like pop culture nowadays.
Sure.
And so like that's why I think of like, yeah, it's classic American literature, so it must have at some point in time kind of been that thing at an earlier date of like, oh man, if you haven't seen latest Avengers movie, you got to go see it. It's wild, it's crazy. So everybody saw it, or Avatar, or whatever it is. That feels like that's what these things must have been at some point in time.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the wrong frame of reference. You know, maybe that was a much more like diluted, or not diluted, but actually distilled, concentrated thing of like the people of this understood that this was a great thing.
I see what you're saying.
Not the masses.
Yeah.
Even though the masses require it to make it what it was.
I see what you're saying. I think more so than like the analogy to like an Avengers movie, I think it's more of like Infinity War and Endgame. Like it's that kind of thing of like, this was something that spoke to the zeitgeist and in some ways challenges it and also engages with it on a level that is in some ways timeless. So like, do I think that every Marvel movie is going to stand up to that? I do not, by any means. But I think that people will still be watching. Obviously, they're still going to be watching Marvel movies, but I think like there are things that will stand up to that. And in 70 years, someone's going to watch, or people are going to still like, oh no, that is the movie you need to watch. Like, unfortunately for like something like Marvel, is like, in order to really understand the gravitas of Infinity War and Endgame, you've got to watch 25 other movies or whatever. Sure. But like, here it is, you know?
Yeah. And I guess that's kind of it for me also, in terms of like, you know, this is like you're saying, like this is like 170 pages.
Yeah.
And it's concise enough that it certainly has the nuance, and it has the veil of like the fun of richness.
Yeah.
The fun of leisure, and this veil of luxury. And certainly that like reading into that and trying to like place yourself in that West Egg, East Egg society is fun.
Yeah.
Trying to, you know, imagine what it must have been like to go to those parties and things like that. But the fact that it just like that it would have grasped so many people and like been like, yes, this is the good stuff.
Yeah.
You know, this is what you want. For whatever reason, like I definitely enjoyed it. And like that's like the fun thing for me of like reading these things is like, I get it. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I'm just kind of surprised that like at the same time that like other people got into it.
So I can tell you this. So initially, The Great Gatsby was actually not a popular thing. It was not the popular choice. It didn't sell very well. It actually, in some ways, was Fitzgerald's demise. In some ways, like it also, like there's a story. There's actually a really good book on The Great Gatsby. It's called So We Read On. And it's by Maureen Corrigan. It's fantastic. And if you love The Great Gatsby or just any classic literature, it's so good. And she like deep dives into a lot of things surrounding Fitzgerald, surrounding the work, surrounding like popularity. But basically, The Great Gatsby only became popular in the 40s. And so the book was published in the 20s, and it only became popular in the 40s. And so much like Fitzgerald never saw this. Like he never saw the popularity and the reach of The Great Gatsby. He died before this happened.
No kidding.
And so it became popular because American GIs, as they were going to fight in World War II, whether you know the Pacific or the European theater, they were requesting entertainment. You know, there would be periods where we're just sitting around or like, I want some version of home. And somehow Scribner, the publisher of The Great Gatsby, like entered a deal with the government of like, yeah, we'll give you these. And like Gatsby was part of it. And so they printed these like pocket-sized versions that would fit in like the breast pocket of a uniform, right. A military uniform. And so The Great Gatsby was one of those books. And it was, I don't know if it was like the most widely printed one, but it was widely printed and it was sent to all these soldiers. And so a lot of soldiers read it and it reminded them of home. and it reminded them of New York, and it reminded them of like the things that for whatever reason they were fighting for. Right. And like not just that, but it was like it's very, it's kind of like this is a quintessential American book, even though it didn't sell very well. So then people came back and they were like, this thing. Like
this got me through.
Yeah, and I don't know, like maybe that's a little bit romanticizing the scenario, but like in some ways, yeah, it was like this thing is something that like took me out of that current situation.
But it's also like, man, did y'all finish the book? That this is what we're fighting for? Like, I mean, the overall like theme is more or less that like it doesn't matter if you're not born into it, you're not a part of it.
Right.
It doesn't matter how much wealth you amass. It doesn't how much luxury you wrap yourself in. If you're not in the club, man, you can't get into it.
Right. And like you don't even try to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's just, doesn't matter what you achieve.
Yeah.
Be it accolades, be it, military service, whatever it is.
But I think in some ways, like though, at the
money will still overtake you.
Sure, and that is absolutely one of the readings of it. But I think like at the very end, the last couple of lines, so we beat on boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. It's this idea that yes, Gatsby was fighting for something. He was fighting to acquire something, or maybe even fighting against something, depending on perspective. But we are constantly being born back into our past, and we're fighting against that current moving forward. We constantly want to look back at our past and recognize maybe how good it was or the things we should have done. So like, I can't imagine, being a soldier sitting in, a foxhole in Belgium, reading this book and like reminiscing on your past. And so like, I don't disagree, because like,
just don't make it to the end.
You're not wrong.
Don't make it to the end of the book.
No, I think make it to
That'll
the end of the book.
That'll keep you fighting.
I think make it to the end of the book, and then you realize like, but that's okay. Like, not that he, just, I don't want to spoil a 100-year-old book at this point,
right.
But like the Gatsby dies.
Right. Yeah.
And so like, not that happens,
and
but
not
like,
even at his own fault or doing or anything. That
no, you're right. It's not his fault, but like, it's that idea of we are constantly.
Yeah. I mean, like very surface level.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
the circumstances that caused his death.
Yeah.
Nothing there was like at surface level his doing.
Right.
He was covering, and then he was also like striving so hard to achieve his final goal that he was willing to dismiss things that he really shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And it ends up getting him.
What I'm getting at is that the ending, Gatsby believed in the green light. You had something that you were willing to sacrifice for. And for Gatsby, as an individual, that's what he's doing. He sacrificed everything for that one thing. And whether you want to call like that a fool's errand or like that's just ridiculous, like this person never really wanted you anyway, all of those are true, which is also why I love it. Like the nuance and the constant debate. But the line then is, it eluded us then. I'm doing this from memory. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms farther, and one fine morning. And I can't like, obviously I've never been in that situation, but like today was shit. Today was horrendous. And yes, it sucked, but that's okay. Here in the midst of it all, here's the hope. Tomorrow we will reach out our arms. Tomorrow we will. And one fine morning, it will all work out. And that's okay. Yeah, Gatsby died. And I recognize like that's a problem. But it's what he represented and the things that he was willing to do. And I think like in some ways, and I want to be clear, like that is, of my many readings, that is a reading. Like I have alternative.
Sure.
But like, I understand it.
Is that the current?
That's one of the currents. And I'm born back ceaselessly into the past. Right. Yeah. No, but I think like that's also part of why it endures. It's that like, it's a matter of, I mean, Nick says this at some point in the novel, this is a matter of infinite hope.
Right.
That's what he represents. In some ways, like this like everything else be damned. It's a matter of infinite hope.
That, and like, in thinking of it in those terms, like it's such an appropriate point to put across for a novel written in America at that point in time.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's like why reading it now, I'm kind of disillusioned by it.
I think it's that no matter how bad things are, there is still tomorrow. There's still that hope for tomorrow. And so I recognize like why that would resonate with anyone.
Yeah, I still just look at it as like, how do you see that?
Yeah.
When your main character got shot in the back, how do you still have room for that hope? Like the blindless hope, I guess. But like, do you not like? I guess even from Nick Carraway's like perspective of like, how do you not recognize that as like, man? But you still got to have your head on a 360
because it wasn't Gatsby's fault. Like Nick, that's what Nick is trying to say. This was not Gatsby's fault. It was the things that preyed on Gatsby. That's the problem. So I think like in some ways Nick is saying like, yes, Gatsby was shot. Yeah, but it's not Gatsby. Like sure, Gatsby was singularly focused.
Yes.
Gatsby like didn't have his head on a swivel. He was unaware of all these things. But like how many people are that? How many people are singularly focused? Like, this is my goal in life. This is the thing that I want to do. I need to accomplish that. And that's okay.
It is okay.
Until you get shot in the back.
Nah, it's not that. But it's like, but pessimistic. Yeah. Like, absolutely, like, grumpy old man take is just like, but for what? Why are you so, like, willing to, like, disregard everything else? Like, for quote-unquote love? For like puppy love, for like the love that I had 5 years ago, and I just want that back. I want that feeling back so bad, that to disregard everything else that I have accomplished, all the wonders that I now have at my fingertips, I'm willing to like just absolutely let it all wash away for that green light.
And I think that's part of
to go back in time.
I agree
and
with
rewrite it all.
I agree with your pessimism. That's part of the folly of that too.
Right.
And like I think Nick in the novel recognizes that. Recognizes the foolhardy thing here.
But don't champion it.
I think it's not necessarily
I'm about to say you're about to.
Yeah, I'm digging myself a bit of a hole.
I think digging a hole, but you're just
maybe I'm contradicting myself in some ways. I think it's the recognition that like that is the default human practice, like that we want to think about our past and like how can I change it? Okay, so if I can repeat the past, and Gatsby says this, like Nick says you can't repeat the past, and Jay responds like, of course you can, and so like there is that recognition of folly. But like that's the constant thing that we want to do. We want to repeat that past and make it better.
I want to like fix it for Nick and say that it's because you realize that that's actually the best that there is.
Right.
Is to die still reaching for the goal, to still think that you can reach it. But now
that's good. Yeah.
But now on this side of it, and to see that it like you never had it. You never had a chance at getting it. It was never even within your reach. It's wonderful that you were able to go out still thinking it was within reach.
But that's what I agree. And I think like that's what keeps us going though. Like how many of us, I'm going to get maybe bleak, but how many of us like that is the thing. You can get famous because people do it. You can get rich because people do it. So now we spend our entire lives trying to do those things. And for what? Like, what do we miss? And I agree with you completely. What do we miss out on because we're trying to do that?
Right. Yeah.
Maybe that is an American-centric thing. Maybe it's not the living in the moment and, like, actually enjoying the time.
Look around you.
Oh, yeah.
Come on, Gatsby.
Right.
You got it made,
but, like,
guy.
How... I
don't know who she is, but she ain't worth all this.
Yeah.
But I think I think Nick's take on it of, like, kind of idolizing Gatsby for it is, I would love to say that and I guess that's like where you as the reader, you get to put your inflection on it and your interpretation into it, is maybe he is recognizing it that like, man, like thank goodness the veil was never dropped for him and he was never broken in that way, because if he ever had come to the absolute conclusion that she was never going to be with you.
Yeah.
That would have been more devastating to have to go through that than to be able to go out still with it in grasp.
And so I think what makes it and makes that perspective even more interesting to me is that Nick is saying this and he is the upper class himself.
Right.
He is part of all of that. He's in it. at the very beginning of the text, maybe like the first or second page, he talks about like, my family are well-to-do people. For like 3 generations, we've been this like great family. Right. He's descended from the some sort of Duke line in Scotland, and like his great grandfather, I think, sent someone to the Civil War on his like.
Yeah, I love going back and like reading takes on a book and like learning those things that I didn't pick up on reading it myself, because like I must have just glossed over that paragraph, that sentence.
And that's, you're supposed to, because it's at the very beginning.
Right.
So in some ways, like, you're supposed to. Which,
well, and like,
again, that's why rereading is phenomenal.
For sure. And that's like hopping around from book to book. Like, it takes you 3 or 4 chapters to get into it.
Yeah.
To understand like the writing style and
do I like this?
Yeah, to like really get yourself into it. And I totally like, I glossed right over that.
Yeah.
Didn't realize that was the case. And it was like in watching a cover of the novel that I saw that it was like, oh yeah. And then like even kind of like even going more into that of like learning that like, yeah, that was a thing of like, yeah, as a affluent person in the Civil War, you could go and buy somebody to send in for you and fight for you, so that you could go off and study,
do whatever you need to do
abroad or whatever that you need to go do.
And you got the accolades.
Right. Yeah. It still all went to you.
Right. Wow. Well, and like, again, very early, Nick basically says like, my dad financed me to go east for a year.
Right.
And like, I'm going to go learn the bond business, but like dad's financing me. So he talks about like his little bungalow just outside of Gatsby's house, which I think is the gardener's cottage, maybe. That sounds right. And like, his dad's giving him all the money for this.
Right.
And so it's like, dude, you are the thing. Like, you are that money class, man. Like, you are that.
And so like even though this is like written several decades before The Sun Also Rises, but like,
no, it's written the same time. Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're totally right. So that same aspect of like writing a story about people that exist and do all these affluent, exorbitant things. Yeah. But when do you work? Like, there's never a sentence about I need to go do some work.
Yeah.
I got to go to, my 9 to 5 right now.
Well,
like, it just doesn't exist.
There's a part towards the end, and like, this is when Gatsby's killed. Like, Nick's been out with Jay like all night. He's like, yeah, man, I got to go to work. And so like, when Nick is actually at work, like, he tries to call Gatsby and he's shot.
Yeah.
But it's like, you've been out all night. Like, literally, Nick talks about like, I'll wait up with you. Like, the sun's rising. I got to go to work. And it's like, dude, you've been up all night with like drinking with this guy and hanging out, and like, now you gotta go to work.
And you gonna go sell stocks or whatever you do.
Shit.
Cool, man.
Okay. Like, talk about that.
Good luck.
Like,
good luck.
Could, you can drink some coffee and just sit at the desk or whatever. So I think in some ways, like, that's also interesting too, of like, Nick is commenting on all of these ills, and the dude is part of it. And like, I think like, I don't know if he doesn't know or he doesn't recognize, but like, that to me is also what undermines or creates that other layer to it of like, you don't understand.
Right.
Or maybe you do, and you're just, fine with not really acknowledging it. So do we got like 6 more hours?
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you want to go to now?
Our episode is already at 7 hours. Like, we've talked for 7 hours right now.
Man, the extended cut that y'all didn't get. If you like this book, man, like, email us. And we'll send you that.
It is. We started recording, and it is now 2 a.m. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, and I've got to get up in 3 hours.
Right.
So I think we should call it.
Okay. Fair enough.
We could still keep going, I guess.
We didn't even dive into. Never mind. I don't even want to bring it up.
No, I mean, but I want you to, because I want to talk about it. It's like, this is 5 years in the making.
Right.
Okay. Let's end with this. Do you see yourself reading this again?
Yeah, I think I probably do.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the size of it.
Sure.
And the notoriety of it. Mm-hmm. The fact that you love it so much. I think I probably will at some point in time, now that I own a copy.
Right.
Just jump back into it and do it.
And I think in some ways that's my challenge to you too. Now that you've read it, put it away for a little while, but definitely come back to it. Whether it's in a year or even 2 years, because I think your reading of the thing will definitely change.
I hope so. And I hope that, like, now having read it once and having seen the movie, that, like, I will be able to more disassociate the two. It wasn't like it was like a huge, and like we said, like it's a very pretty darn well, like, accurate representation of the story. Again, there's something that you're obviously, like, looking at somebody else's interpretation of the thing. So, like, you don't get to create the characters in your mind. You don't get to create the settings and things like that, because it's immediately overtaken by what you've already associated it with.
Yeah.
And that's like my biggest nitpick of, like, reading it the way that I did. I felt like I was robbed of that, and, like, I really enjoy that aspect of reading, of creating the characters in my head and all that kind of stuff. So, like, the fact that, like, I felt like I was immediately familiar, in a way, just was like,
and you can't go back.
Well, and I kept reading, hoping that, like, oh, I can't wait to find the thing that they did differently. And, like, there just really wasn't anything there. Like, it is such a kind of a short, succinct story, that they pretty well covered it.
I do have one thing, and I know that we just said wrapping this up, but I do have one thing that they didn't include. And there's this, like, to me, it's one of the most central, like, sad parts of the text, and that's where Gatsby is at his house, and a couple of people, including Tom Buchanan, like, ride horses to Gatsby's house, and there's this exchange of, like, oh, Gatsby's this person. Oh, yeah, I know your wife, blah, blah, blah. I know these people, blah, blah, blah. And a woman, like, invites Gatsby to dinner. And he says, I don't have a horse. Let me go get my car. And they ride off. And that's, like, the recognition of he so desperately wants to be a part of these people. And you get a little bit of this in the Plaza Hotel scene, where Tom says, like, you will never be me. Like, you can have all the money in the world, but you will never be me.
Right.
And so they cut that scene of, like, Gatsby, like, looking at the people riding away. To me, it's one of those, like, throwaway scenes almost. And I recognize why they cut it, but, like, it is so central to how we should perceive Gatsby as this, like, tragic figure.
Well, and I think that one other thing that I picked up too was the fact that once Gatsby and Daisy start seeing each other again on a more kind of regular basis, that he fires his entire staff and rehires a bunch of new people who aren't, like, upkeeping the grounds very well. That's not in the movie. So, like, that was, like, an interesting, like,
oh, we're doing the thing, man.
Yeah. And it's like Nick notices it, and he's like, what's happening? And like, Gatsby more or less, like, tells him, he's like, yeah, I had to, like, fire everybody.
They're too close,
and these people are just like, they're not good at it. It's like, that's interesting.
We're doing the thing that I said that we shouldn't do, and we're talking about it.
Yeah. Right.
It's so good.
That and just the fact that he was willing to take it again to, like, that level.
Right.
Of like, I'm gonna do whatever it takes. I get to fire all these people. Done. Like, they all need to keep their mouths shut.
Well, I'm glad that you liked it, and I'm glad that, or I'm hopeful that you do indeed reread it again.
I'm sure I will.
Yeah. You got anything else?
Plenty more.
Yeah, but
we should.
It's now 2:45.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Oh boy. All right. Well, we'd love to know, what do you think about The Great Gatsby?
Indeed. What is your favorite aspect of it, and why do you keep coming back to it?
And if you've never read it, what are you doing?
Yeah. Have you waited this long? It's
been out.
Go grab it.
It's been out a minute.
$5. You can go get you a copy of it.
Sure. Free. It's part of the public domain.
It's free.
Yeah.
I'll go get you.
Yeah. You can print it out, local library, if you want.
Probably the Library of Congress. You can probably just look it up.
Probably. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Or Internet Archive or whatever. Or just go to your local library and take that copy and walk out.
There you go.
Yeah, they got more. Actually, don't do that. That's probably a felony, because it's like, public property kind of thing.
True story.
Yeah, you don't
stay away from that.
Public property.
Also,
yeah, we'd also love to know,
what do you think of the Weller 12? What's your favorite aspects of it? Why do you keep coming back to it?
Is it worth the constant search for it?
Yeah, who knows? And would that be like your pour at Gatsby's party?
Nah, it'd be that Remus Gatsby bottle.
I want to try it. Yeah, for sure. That'd be that first.
It's a bit expensive.
That first Saturday, but then the next one, I might hit up the Pappy. He's got I got a whole case open right over there.
Yeah, sure. How much gin? Okay, he's got 12
bottles open of the 23-year-old. Open.
And that's just for him.
Yeah,
But
and
he
they're
didn't really
just
drink,
sitting
so,
there.
yeah.
Like, dude over there's carrying one around. I'm sipping from it.
Sure. Well, you can get in touch with us through email. It's drepandstone@gmail.com. You can also get in touch with us through social media.
Find us anywhere. It's DREP and Stone, all just kind of one word smashed together like a big old sandwich.
Yeah.
Wherever you're socializing media, we are too. Come find us, like us, share a thing, like a thing. Those are really cool things.
You can also support the podcast by rating Drip and Stone wherever it is you find great podcasts like this one. Financially support the podcast through our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/Drip and Stone. And finally, you can support the podcast by telling your best friend and your mistress about Drip and Stone.
Let Daisy know. You know, I mean, she's got all that time to kill during the day. She's doing nothing else. Like, I mean, she got a kid, but does she really? Not really. You know,
Not really.
She's
Pammy,
killing time,
she's
man.
there,
she's
but
killing time.
Yeah, Pammy, I suppose she eats and breathes and
But
stuff.
she got a nanny,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
like, whatever.
She's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, she's good.
Yeah. On that note, hey, buddy.
Hey, buddy.
May your glass overflow.
And your ass never show. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers.